Hi, boys and girls. I'm going to talk to you a little bit this week about some different types of text structure that authors use when they're writing nonfiction articles. Sometimes the way that the writer organizes their writing can help us make better sense of what they're writing about. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the text structure of compare and contrast. I'm going to present my screen for you here so that you can see some slides. And then we'll get going. When we talk about compare and contrast, we are looking at how things are the same and how they are different. The writer is showing similarities and differences between two or more things. We can often get clues that we're reading a compare and contrast article because we'll see words like however, on the other hand, similarly, like, or unlike. When we're comparing the things, we're talking about how they are alike. And when we're contrasting them, we're looking at how they are different. I'm going to read you an article about Greenland and Iceland. And after, we're going to do some comparing and contrasting about the two countries. As I'm reading, see if you can find similarities and differences, and also see if you find any clue words that would tell us that this article is a compare and contrast article. Greenland and Iceland. Greenland and Iceland were settled by Vikings and have legendary tales about the origins of their names. However, you may be surprised by the differences between these two lands. How Iceland got its name. In 867, a Viking named Floki sailed from Norway, hoping to reach an island he'd heard about from another Viking who had landed there accidentally when his ship was blown off course. Tragically, Floki's daughter drowned during the journey. The livestock he'd brought to the island died of starvation. As cold temperatures stretched into spring, Floki climbed a mountain to look for signs that milder weather was on its way. Instead, he saw inlets filled with icebergs. He named the country Iceland after his icy view. Floki was eager to return to Norway. He told everyone back home that Iceland was a terrible place and not to bother settling there. How Greenland got its name. The naming of Greenland is attributed to the Viking Eric the Red. Eric was originally from Norway. However, in 960, when Eric was 10, his father was banished from Norway for having committed a number of crimes. Eric's family moved to Iceland, where, despite Floki's negative reviews, Vikings had been settling for nearly 100 years. In 982, Eric himself was banished from Iceland for 3 years. He sailed west for 900 nautical miles before reaching the coast of an icy island. On the southern tip of the island, he found a few spots with enough vegetation to support raising livestock. After 3 years, Eric returned to Iceland. He wanted to convince people to leave Iceland and settle on the new land he had discovered. Unlike Floki, he bragged about how great the island was and gave it the favorable name of Greenland. Are their names misleading? Despite its name, only 11% of Iceland is permanently covered by ice. Much of Iceland's landscape is grassy pastures and moss covered lava rocks. It's possible that Floki didn't see much of the greener land when he was in Iceland. On the other hand, more than 80% of Greenland is covered by a polar ice cap. Research suggests that Greenland's climate may have been warmer long ago. Thus, Greenland may actually have been greener when Eric the Red discovered it. So now we're going to look a little bit based on the article. What were some things that were just true about Greenland, just true about Iceland, or maybe some things that were the same about both? Sometimes I like to start off with what the similarities were. For example, I know that both Greenland and Iceland were discovered by Vikings. They were different Vikings, but they were both Vikings. I also know that for both countries, the name doesn't really fit the land. For example, they talked about that Greenland is mostly covered in ice and Iceland is mostly covered in green. So it's kind of funny how the name of it doesn't fit what the actual land looks like. Now, if I wanted to think about something that was just true about Greenland, I might say, okay, well, I know that it's mostly covered by a polar ice cap. I also know that it was discovered by the Viking Eric, and he wanted people to come. That's why he gave it a favorable review, which means a good review. He's like, this place is great. Everybody should come here. Now, Iceland, on the other hand, is only 11% covered by ice. The Viking Floki discovered it, and he didn't want people to go there. He said, "Oh, it's covered in ice. It's not a very good place to go." So by using the Venn diagram, could show what were things that were just true about Greenland, what were some things that were just true about Iceland, and what were some similarities between the two. Now, while I was reading the article, I was kind of looking for words that helped show me that this was a compare and contrast article. I'm going to write down just a few of the examples that I found. Um, I saw the word however, um, differences, on the other hand, and alike. Now, you may have found even more while I was reading. I'm just listing a few examples. The last thing I want to think about is what was the author's main purpose for writing this passage? Why did they write this article about Greenland and Iceland? And I think that the author's main purpose was to show the differences between Iceland and Greenland, and also tell how they got their names. So that was what I took as the author's main purpose for writing this. Now I'm going to close out of present mode here. What you're going to be doing for your practice is you have an article about schools on your learning board that I'd like you to read. Then you're going to go into Seesaw and complete the compare and contrast activity, just like I did on the slides, where you'll fill out a Venn diagram and list some words that helped you know it was compare and contrast, and also identify what do you think was the author's main purpose for writing this. I hope you had fun learning a little bit more about compare and contrast. Good luck on your reading.